Evening, everyone. All right. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification course. If you're standing, you can please be seated. And welcome to those of you who are joining us online, Facebook.com, official Peaceful Solution site. We are definitely in the dog days of summer here in Texas, I tell you what. But we are bearing through the heat. You know, it's interesting because many places throughout the earth right now, and we talked a little bit about, it just kind of reminds me of when these values are placed in the hearts and the minds of people at a very young age. Because what we see in our society, our environment right now, is the result, and the scientists are finally acknowledging this, it's the result of mankind's actions and how they interact with their environment that is bringing some very drastic changes in our environment. And like we learned in the very first unit of the Peaceful Solution in the Character Unit, in fact in the very first chapter, we talked about the three basic categories of morality. And if you remember, one of those were the behavior and attitude towards our environment, okay, and as well as all life, human, plant, and animal. And of course, when people have morals, they have positive moral values that they can abide by, then of course they're going to interact with their environment in a way that won't bring harm. And it's not just won't bring harm right now at this very moment, or won't bring harm only in my lifetime or my generation, but won't bring harm at any time. Right? Because the things we do now kind of lay the groundwork and the foundation for what other generations are going to have to deal with. And so I was just thinking about that because, you know, we've got some students who stay far north of us in the some of the provinces, I think they're called provinces, of Canada, and they just had some pretty heavy record-breaking weather up there of temperatures of upwards of 127 degrees. Fahrenheit. Celsius, I think they'd probably be dead if it was Celsius, but it was Fahrenheit. And they're not used to anything like that. You know, their typical summertime temperatures are, you know, in the 70s, the mid 70s, maybe upper 60s, and it's a sweltering day if it gets in the 80s. So, you know, these are just kind of real life examples of what we can see taking place in our environment when moral values are not taught, accepted, and practiced within society. Okay, and it's kind of a ripple effect that we see as the weather patterns continue to get worse, along with other things that are affected by that as well. Rising sea tides, rising oceans, bigger storms, and so forth. But that's going to bring us here as we move forward into acceptance, because, you know, some of those things we can make changes about, some of those things we can't, right? And of course, with this unit here on acceptance, we are in chapter 2. We're going to look at some of these things and see how we can, you know, make changes in our own life that will bring about acceptance or difference for us, but also for our environment. Now, William, last class, talked about intolerance. He kind of finished up that with intolerance. And we're going to pick up a little bit of that today. We're going to start on page 33. You have your books. Let's go back to lesson plan 2, page E. Lesson plan 2, page E. Get situated here. And we're going to look at procedure 7. And it says, tell students that knowledge is powerful and can bring about change. Now, for those of our great student teachers out there, who can remember where that statement, knowledge is powerful, or power, is in the acceptance unit? What page is that on in the acceptance unit? If you're following on Facebook, you know, feel free to type it in. Who said it? Page 11, that's right. So before we move forward in this procedure, let's flip back to page 11. So we might have some new students who are joining us. And of course, if we do, I do encourage you to go back, you know, in between these classes and review the previous lessons so it can kind of bring you up to speed for where we are right now, because there's a lot of information that was covered that laid the groundwork for what we're going to be covering tonight. All right, so on page 11 it says, knowledge is power, and that's what we just got finished reading there on procedure 7. Tell the students that knowledge is, and this word is used here, powerful, or full of power, the ability to bring about some type of change. And it says, taking your education seriously is another way you can demonstrate that you are a unique individual with potential. And that's the thing about power. It creates a potential within people to bring about a change. Give me a second there for a little light. Power creates a potential within individuals that can bring about a change. And the second sentence says, you have a responsibility to continuously pursue positive moral ways to improve yourself. Getting a sound education is one way in which you can do this. Now, of course, we've talked about this and harped on this from the very beginning. Education, education, education. That's the first positive character trait of this positive character traits that we went in the character unit. Just give me a second here. It's really hot. You got to keep yourself hydrated. Educate yourself so that you can have this knowledge to bring about the changes that we need to see in society. So now listen here what it says about a person who is well informed. In that first paragraph, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up, it says, give me a second here, catch my breath. It says, well-informed people are knowledgeable about the world around them. They pay attention to influences around them. And notice here, they gather all the facts and then test and prove what is correct before making a decision. All right? So they do this before they make a decision. Let's go back to the lesson plan there. LP2, page E. All right. I feel like coming around there. Okay. It says, tell students that knowledge is powerful and can bring about change. Explain that now they have the knowledge to make a difference in their lives by practicing acceptance. Now when we tell the students this about practicing acceptance, one of the things we want to keep in mind is what is acceptance, because they're going to be practicing acceptance, right? You're telling them that they can bring a difference or make a change in their lives by practicing acceptance. Well, if you go back to page 3, this is just a little refresher here. Go back to page 3 of the acceptance unit here in chapter 1. And accepting me, accepting you. Acceptance, as presented in this unit of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, means to willingly acknowledge the positive characteristics about yourself and others. Acceptance means understanding that there are aspects of your life that you can and cannot change. And at the very bottom there it says, accepting yourself means realizing that you are a unique human being, and your ability to make a difference in your life and the lives of others depends on the amount of time and effort you put forth in your studies. Again, going back to that statement of knowledge is power. And if we look at page 26, sorry, I'm just get my bearings. Oh, 23. I'm sorry, page 23. Same unit. Last paragraph. Last sentence. And it talks about accepting diversity here. And this is the chapter that we're in. And it says, you will learn in this chapter that accepting others, looking past what makes us different, and focusing on our similarities will lead us to a place called appreciation and respect. So the combination of these two things brings us to practicing acceptance. All right. Now here, continuing on in Procedure 7, it says, tell the students they are now ready to take on the challenge of making a difference. Have students turn to page 34, 33, and 34 in their handbooks and read the sections entitled Make a Difference, Make a Choice, in order to answer the questions that follow the scenario. It also says, tell students that they are to be respectful when dealing with those who might be intolerant. Now, we haven't gotten to that. We've got 2 more units here before we get to the respect unit. But we talk a lot about this in chapter 5 of the respect unit in dealing with responding to disrespect. Okay? Because when people are intolerant and they choose to interact with you as they voice or act out that intolerance, that falls into a category of being a form of disrespect. Well, on the receiving end, we can't do anything to that person, right? To change them or to make them want to respect us, or to just reach in and snatch that intolerance out of their heart and mind. But what we do have control over is how we respond to it, okay? And we'll get into that when we get into the respect unit, but just keep that in mind as we talk about this. Stress that the most effective way to deal with intolerance is to make a difference by their example of practicing the values that they learned from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And, that reminds me, if you write down for your notes in the character unit, page 126, when we talked about leadership, because we're still dealing with training our young men and training our young women, or old men and old women, whoever is our student, to be a leader. But of course, not just any leader, but a positive leader. And it says, stress the most effective way to deal with intolerance is to make a difference by their example of practicing the values they learned from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. Now, if you write in your notes there, pages 126, 27, you can write 126 through 29. If you want, just go back and reread chapter 6 of the character unit, because it covers a lot of things. But I just wanted to hit on a few points here. On page 126, under the title of Who is a Leader? And in that first paragraph, in the last sentence, it reads, leaders are simply people, and it's in bold here, so it's very important, take note of it. Leaders are simply people who possess qualities and skills that motivate and encourage others towards specific goals. Okay, and this is the characteristic of a leader. They encourage and motivate others towards specific goals. Now, our goal here is to change the hearts and the minds, right? To instill within the character of mankind a desire to do the right thing, to make the right choice. Of course, right choice is one that doesn't bring harm to ourselves, others, or the environment. But leaders that's simply who they are, people who possess these qualities and skills to motivate and encourage others towards specific goals. And of course, being found in all aspects and areas of society, if they have these positive character, these positive traits, these skills in any area of life, that's always going to be their goal, to encourage and motivate others. On page 127, if we look over just to the next page here under the deciding factor, still talking about leaders here, and it talks about the leadership styles. And then they fall into one of two basic categories, one being positive and the other being negative. If you look down to the third paragraph, it says positive leaders Positive leaders, on the other hand, are people of integrity. They maintain and demonstrate. Now remember, we're talking about practicing acceptance here, that we're trying to encourage the students to remember to practice acceptance in order to make a difference in their lives and in the lives of others. And they're showing this by their example of practicing the values they learned from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. That's why everything that we're going over here, from the character unit all the way up to the very last lesson that we cover here, it's important that it's continuously rehearsed. You know, when you go home and in between classes, you know, you get up in the morning, or you sit down to have a little bit of supper, or possibly even at night before you go to bed, you know, you can crack open one of your units of the Peaceful Solution and just, you know, go to sleep or get up and start your day with a positive thought. You know, set a goal for your mind that today I'm going to really work hard on putting this particular character trait into practice. Today I'm going to strive to be a positive leader this way, and I'm going to use these traits. I'm going to help encourage somebody else to see the value within themselves. You know, so set these positive goals for yourself so that it will ripple outward and be a positive impact on somebody else. Positive leaders, on the other hand, are people of integrity. They maintain and demonstrate their positive moral character consistently, notice here, through their beliefs. So if their belief systems are grounded in morals, if their belief system are grounded in positive values, moral principles, moral values, then that's going to come out in their choices, in their behaviors, their actions, and their attitudes. They motivate others to also attain positive moral characters and to strive towards excellence in all areas of their lives. Now, in addition to this, positive leaders will result in a ripple effect that will be advantageous not only to the individual, but to society as a whole. Now, if you look at this on the flip side from what we were covering in the previous classes and talking about intolerance, you see how negative leaders, right, they use their leadership skills to motivate people in a direction that brought harm towards themselves and others, okay? And it rippled outward negatively and it did infect, but it impacted the society in a negative way. And even 50, 60 years later, you know, we're still having to deal with the consequences of those negative beliefs or those negative ideologies or the propaganda that were put out about people of different cultures, of different ethnicities or nationalities and so forth, that, you know, those people are still having to deal with because of those ideals, those negative values that certain leaders instilled within the people of a community, a family, or even, as we saw, even nations. But it says, in addition to this, positive leaders will result in a ripple effect that will be advantageous not only to the individual but society as a whole. So hence, the deciding factor between a positive and negative leader is the same thing that decides the quality, either positively or negatively, of all people, and that, of course, is character. And lastly here on this statement of, and it be an example of practicing, on page 129, under There Is a Leader in You, it says here in the first paragraph, kind of towards the lower part, towards the end, it says, so regardless of how young or old you are, you can learn how to lead and value being a positive leader. Sooner or later, everyone is asked to lead in one way or another. And so we never know what we do or what we'll be given the opportunity to do that will put us in a position of leadership of others. And this is why it's necessary that we value the things that we are being taught in the Peaceful Solution, because, you know, eventually that's going to kind of overshadow your thought process. That's going to become your main thinking process, right? That's going to become how you automatically respond to difficult situations, by taking the values, the principles that you've learned in the Peaceful Solution, and that will become your go-to solution for dealing with any problem that might arise in life, whether it's something that you saw coming or something that came upon you suddenly. You'll revert back to your training. Like I like to use the example of paramedics and firefighters, police officers, people who are in the field of rescue, search and rescue. A lot of them, when they're doing an interview, and you've seen like many types of disasters that have taken place, and sometimes they'll be interviewed on television about, or a documentary that might have taken place about, some type of natural disaster, or a plane crash or something like that. And a lot of times you'll hear them make the statement, well, we just in that moment go back to our training. We go back to our training and rely on that. We kind of go into, I've heard them say, we've gone into autopilot mode, right? And that training kicks in, and it starts to guide your thoughts and actions in how you respond to those dangerous situations. Now, a person who is not trained in responding to a fire or an earthquake or a landslide or avalanche or a car crash, they're kind of gonna go crazy, right? Because they're all these impulses or stimuli are coming at them, and they're just kind of trying to figure out the best way to respond, and a lot of times they make the situation worse. Well, it's no different with our character, right? The more we study and put into practice these principles in the Peaceful Solution, the easier it will be for you to be able to respond when a difficult situation arises. So it says here in the last paragraph, it says, one of the keys to learning how to lead is to maintain your positive character. You might suddenly find yourself in a situation where everyone else is doing the wrong thing. Knowing how to be a positive leader can help you get yourself and others out of a bad situation. You see, so you kind of go right back to your training. And of course, dealing with leadership, I mean, we can never underestimate the value of a positive leader. And a positive leader can never underestimate the value of a positive moral education, right? Because they know that's the strength, that's the backbone that makes them who they are. Sometimes making a difference means taking the initiative and having the courage to stand up for what is right. And if you remember from the previous classes that William and Chris covered, there were many examples of positive leaders who did that very thing, right? They took the initiative. They stood up for what was right. In other words, they stood up for what was morally correct. And those examples that we read there that were put in the Peaceful Solution, these people never had to lift the gun. They never had to lift the fist. They never had to make a threat in order to accomplish or bring about a change in society. They did it through positive means. And this is how we're going to start to bring about change in society, even in this time, is by taking the time and the effort to educate ourselves, to understand, first off, what is the problem? How did it get there? And then second, what do we need to do the opposite actions to eliminate that problem and bring about a positive change? You never know when, through your positive leadership, you might encourage someone else to make a right choice. And many of those leaders in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, they encouraged others, because sometimes people look at issues in society and they want to make a change. They want to do something, but they're kind of afraid to be the first person to step out. A lot of times people are afraid of failure, and in doing any new endeavor, there is an occasion where you're going to make mistakes. There's occasion where you might fail a time or two. But when you have a positive goal, nothing should ever dissuade you from working hard to achieve that goal, even if you do trip a few times. I kind of like to compare it to an infant, a baby, a toddler, learning to walk for the very first time. You see them, they start crawling, and then they get up on their feet, and they're a little bit shaky, and they don't have great balance, but first one step and then another, and they fall down and they get back up, and they fall down and they get back up, and they might fall down 100 times within a day, but they keep getting back up, and eventually over a few weeks time, they're running throughout the house. Well, that's any endeavor that we partake in. It takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes determination and practice in order to get it right. So anyway, it says here, stress the most effective way to deal with intolerance is to make a difference by their example. So always keep that in mind, because our examples create a ripple effect. And I've heard it said before, about people who they take the initiative to make changes, but they make changes that are not always the most popular thing. And that's what we said at the very beginning in chapter 1 in the character unit. This course that we're on, that we're teaching right here, this is the road less traveled. This is the salmon going against the stream, right? This is walking uphill when everybody else is walking downhill, right? And it's not always the most popular thing, because in society's mind, the most popular thing is just to sit back and let everything work its way out. But, it's been working its way out for hundreds of years, and have we gotten any closer to peace? Just between the United States and Russia, there's over, I think, 13,000 nuclear warheads between those two countries. Doesn't sound like a peaceful solution's in the work, but we have to make a change. We have to think about long term, not just short term, and that's what we want to instill in our students, because a lot of times when you're dealing with 11 through 13, 11 through 14-year-olds, right here is kind of where their bubble exists, the extension of their goals exists, right? And it kind of takes an adult to get them to thinking a little more long term, to think about what's going to take place in 1 year or 5 year or 10 years or 20 years, right? And how the decisions they make right now can either bring a positive or a negative change into their lives and the lives of others 20 years down the road. So, as a teacher, we can be very inspirational and influential in getting their minds to thinking. It's like people tend to not think about things until it's brought to their attention. And like I said about, people taking the initiative, sometimes people have a great thought or a great idea, but they're too afraid to step out. And once that leader takes the initiative and steps out, then other people start coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, right? Because they agree with that ideology and they want to see a change, but they just didn't want to be the first person to do it or to do it on their own. So let's look to page 33 here as we move forward. We'll get started in this lesson. Make a Difference is titled Make a Choice. Now, William finished off comparing about the apples last class, talking about the differences in the apples and comparing it to us as people. I was going to bring an apple and set it up here and show you the difference. I didn't know if you ate or not, so I didn't want your mouth watering. But between the difference of Granny Smiths and Macintosh and Gala and Fuji's and so forth, yes, the outside, the skin part, looks very different. And it's, if you look at an apple, if you get the opportunity next time you have an apple and you slice that apple open and look at the thickness of the skin of that apple compared to the flesh or the white part of the inside of the apple, and look how minute, how small a part that makes up, that takes up the space, the mass of the apple is compared to what's on the inside. And that's kind of the idea that we were getting here, is that when you cut an apple open, it's all the same. Well, we're all the same inside as far as, the things that make us human. Now, one of the things we're working to improve on making the same is our character, right? Everybody working towards developing a positive character and bringing about choices that create a very peaceful society. So underneath that, what really matters there, it says we all need to be loved. We all want to be loved, needed. We want to fit in and to be accepted, and we all have the potential to learn the value of a positive moral character. And in doing so, that leads us to page 33. Now that you know how damaging hatred and intolerance are, you have the responsibility, okay, because you've been given this great knowledge here. Now we have the responsibility, now the student has the responsibility to share this knowledge with others and to stand up for acceptance even when others insist on an attitude of intolerance. Now, this doesn't mean that the student has to go and get a soapbox, and stand out in the middle of the playground or the schoolyard, and scream out about, intolerance being wrong and how we need to accept one another. But they will see, as we've mentioned in the previous lesson plans, that there will be times that will arise throughout the day in interacting with their friends, and interacting with other peers and even teachers and so forth, that they will be able to rehearse the lessons that were presented in the peaceful solution. And this is where you can give them that, kind of that push in that direction. When you have an opportunity and you're sitting and you're talking with your friends, and they might, make a cruel joke, not cool, but a cruel joke, a joke that shows intolerance or disrespect towards people of different nationalities and so forth. That's your opportunity to present what you've learned in the peaceful solution. That's your opportunity to stand up for what is right, and show that you're not in agreement with that. And we're going to cover some of the things here that can kind of indicate if you are in agreement with some of these forms of intolerance. All right, it says standing up for acceptance of others and in the face of opposition means having determination, courage, and compassion. Determination, courage, and compassion. And determination is very, very important because, especially in today's society, I think some of the things that's kind of helped take away determination out of the minds of people or out of the character of people is what I call just an instant society. Everything is instant, right? If you can't do it yourself, of course somebody can do it for you. If you can't find it, or you don't want to take the time to look and find it in the book, you could just pull it up online, right? And that's kind of rippled over into different aspects of life where people they might set a goal, but they don't have the determination and the discipline to see it through, right? And so this is something that sadly now we have to kind of reinstill within society, this trait of determination, and also courage and compassion, because it can be a pretty scary thing sometimes when you're the only one. Imagine yourself in the position of a 11, 12, 13, or 14-year-old, and you've got your peers around you, and they're, maybe they're the cool class. With you always had your cool kids at school, right? Maybe they're on the sports teams or with the cheerleading or whatever. And everybody is saying something that's derogatory towards someone else, and everyone's laughing at it. And you realize that that's wrong. That's demoralizing. That's hurtful. That's disrespectful. And your heart's beating, your palms are sweaty, your legs are shaking. But you stand up and you say, guys, that's wrong. That's very disrespectful and that's hurtful. And we shouldn't say things like that devalue others. And it takes a lot of courage for a person to do that, especially a young person, because no one wants to be looked at as the outcast in society or in their group, right? Everybody wants to be accepted. And this is a part of the reason why a lot of people don't stand up for doing the right thing, because they don't want to be cast out, right? They want to be accepted. And this is why it takes courage, to make these moral choices. And also compassion. This compassion is of course wanting to relieve people of their suffering. And society, throughout the last several thousand years, there's always been an area or a facet in society that has had suffering, okay? And many people have tried to do certain things to try to alleviate that suffering. Now it also means behaving in a way, and this is talking about standing up for acceptance. It also means behaving in a way that demonstrates respect for all people. And all people is not just the ones you know, not just the ones you like, not just the ones you're familiar with, not just your peer group, your friend group, or your family, or your brother and your sister, but for all people, even those people who are demonstrating this intolerance that we just read about before. Having respect for all people. And again, when we get into the respect unit, we're going to cover that. Everybody deserves respect, and that's a shocker to a lot of young people when you start bringing that to their attention. Even the bully, this person that's bullying me, he bullies me every day, he deserves respect. Yes, he deserves respect. Part of the reason why he might be bullying you is because he never learned to value that character trait of respect because it was never taught to him, possibly even at home. So you might be that one shining light to that person to show them that there is a different way. Okay, and again, never underestimate the power that your positive influence can have, not only on your students, but any of your peers, but your students can have on their peers and even adults. Now, if you kind of, I wrote a little side note there on it also means behaving in a way that demonstrates respect for all people. Page 8 in the character unit, chapter 1, we talk about morals and what do they have to do with my character. And underneath their right and wrong, it says morality can be divided into 3 basic categories. And we kind of started to talk about that a little bit at the beginning of class. And of course, it's behavior and attitude towards all life, possessions and property, and the environment. And then the very first one that goes into detail, this behavior and attitude towards all life, it says moral principles in regards to human life means acknowledging and accepting that life is valuable and all people have the potential to contribute to society. When you have a moral attitude towards others, you accept and appreciate that they have the right to live in peace, safety, and security. And notice here, so it tells you what it means, right? And what the results of it are when you practice these things, and then how you can practice it, how you can demonstrate these moral principles in regards to human life. And the last, second to last sentence there, it says you can demonstrate a moral attitude by being, notice here, respectful. All right, so we tie this right back in from what we read here on page 33 of the acceptance unit. It means behaving in a way that demonstrates respect for all people. When we demonstrate respect for all people, obviously we had to learn the rules or the principles that show respect. And this takes us back to morality. You can demonstrate a moral attitude by being respectful towards all people. This means not taking advantage of others, but rather showing them care and concern. All right, and then they give an example here. I'm back to page 33. It says, for example, a new boy comes to school, and he is from another country and speaks with an accent. He is also handicapped and walks with a limp. Your friend starts mocking the way he walks and talks. They laugh at him when he walks by. Standing up for acceptance means not laughing with your friends. It also means explaining to them that what they are doing is wrong. Okay, so like we just gave the example before, this very same thing here, standing up and actually making a difference. Making a difference, something that's different, it's just opposite from what is the normal, what is currently in front of you. Okay, so making a difference is doing something different than what everybody else is doing. And if everybody else is laughing and mocking and joking about somebody, then making a difference, first off, starting with yourself, because that's the only person you can change. Somebody might think, well, what difference does it make if I stand up and do the right thing? What difference does it make if I tell people that this is wrong? Well, it makes a lot of difference, right? Because every action yields a reaction. Every cause yields an effect. And we might not see that effect immediately, but it might even be 10 or 15 years down the road that person who was once laughing in that group at somebody else, heard the words that you said, and something clicks in their mind, maybe because an experience that they went through, or possibly their own child experienced bullying. And they remember those words that you said all those years back in junior high or high school, and it clicks, and then they take it to heart, and they go, you know what, that's right. So this is what I need to do. So we never, we can't not do something just because we're afraid we won't see an immediate result. And we want to encourage the students that, hey, listen, you standing up for morality, you standing up for doing what's right, you're not doing it just to get an immediate reward, right? You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, okay? Yes, we all want peace. We all want safety. We all want, to have a joyous life and not worry about things being taken from us, not worry about being taken advantage of, not, worry about being talked about or whatever. And that is kind of a reward that comes back to us, kind of like when they give the example of the ripple effect and dropping a pebble in a pond or a little water, a body of water. Well, the thing about ripple effects is those ripples, they go out, but they'll hit the edge and then they'll bounce back and they'll come back towards the middle. All right, so those things that go out eventually come back to us. Okay, so we want to make sure we're putting positive things, encouraging the students to put positive things, making positive choices that go out into society because they will reap the benefits at some point in their life. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. So it says here, standing up for acceptance means not laughing with your friends. It also means explaining to them that what they're doing is wrong. I'm sure you have figured out by now, doing what is right is not always easy. And you will have to be courageous. And this is where that courage kicks in. But notice here, it only takes one voice to make a difference. Let that voice be yours. Let that voice be yours. Kind of like what we were talking about in the character unit, and I read it actually before class, and I didn't make that note, but it talks about how important our it was in the leadership chapter. That's where I read it. But yeah. Page 125. Page 125 in chapter 6, under I Can Make a Difference. It says, whose responsibility is it to ensure a safe world for you to grow up in? Well, the truth of the matter is, your future is too important to hope that someone else will make a difference. It is up to each and every person to consistently demonstrate character skills that will result in peace between individuals, society, and the world. This is the only way to ensure that your future will be safe and secure for all people. Okay, so it's up to each and every person to consistently demonstrate character skills that will result in peace. All right, and that's kind of what we're saying here. It's not always easy, but sometimes it just takes that one voice, that one person, to stand up for what's right. And that will be the trigger that initiates a change. All right, so we're going to look at some scenarios here. And these are some of the things that you would, of course, read to your class and try to get some feedback, get them engaged, get them, rehearsing to you the things that they've learned. And, of course, again, this is your opportunity to gauge and see what they are grasping. What they are grasping and what possibly they're not grasping for the lesson, so that if as a teacher, you need to go back and kind of hit on another point, or incorporate that point into this lesson or the future lessons, just to make sure it gets drilled a little deeper into the mind of the student. Okay, so it says, read the following scenarios and circle the answer that shows an that shows an attitude of acceptance. All right, so read the scenario and circle an answer that shows an attitude of acceptance. So the first scenario, number one, is your brother comes home and shares a racial joke with you. He's laughing so hard he can barely get the words out. What should you do? A, laugh along with him. And it's interesting because, in some of the studies that have been done, they have shown that they can really start to change the mindset, the attitude, the thinking of people if they can engage them in laughter. And they can change their attitudes from things that in their minds would have been considered something immoral, right? If they can put a little twist on it, make it funny. And so, as teachers, we have to be very mindful of the things that we show our agreement with by laughing, right? Because some things can be very immoral, but made to look acceptable because it's put in a funny way. And so we want to let our students know that. And that might seem like, oh man, we can't laugh at anything, everything's boring, blah, blah, blah. But we're just giving them seeds of information, right? And hopefully they'll water it and they'll allow it to grow in their minds and their hearts, and they'll eventually understand it when they see it, right? But that laughter, that shows an agreement with something. So if you laugh along with him, do you laugh along with him? After all, hey, a funny joke is a funny joke. B, tell him that it's wrong to make jokes about others and then laugh when he leaves the room. C, tell him that it is wrong, but then later share that joke with your friend. Okay? And in what we're talking about here, doing that very thing would be a part of spreading intolerance, right? It'd be a part of spreading disrespect, a disrespectful attitude towards, in this case, somebody of a different color or nationality. Or the last one, D. Tell him the joke is not funny and it promotes intolerance. Explain the damage intolerance brings and do not repeat the joke to anyone else. Okay? Of course, the correct answer in this would be D, because those types of things we want to really try to stop in their tracks, so to speak, right? And if you stand up for something that's against intolerance, if you stand up for things that are morally correct, one of two things are going to take place. You're going to kind of convince the person or influence the person or encourage the person to change their way of thinking, and they're not going to listen to, laugh at, or repeat those disrespectful types of jokes anymore, or they're just not going to tell those jokes around you, right? So again, you can't force a change on that person, but you can be a positive influence. And at the very least, you won't have those negative influences being presented to you. On page 34 here, number 2, it says, during class, there is a discussion about terrorism. Most of the class wants to nuke the nation where the terrorists are from or were from. What do you say? A, hey, I think we should nuke them. Those people don't care about us. B, hey, you can't destroy innocent people because of what a few did. C, it would be great if the governments found a way to better communicate with each other and avoid the violence, all the violence. Of course, the answer on this one would be both B and C, right? Because you look at this and you see that these two answers, of course, they don't bring harm to anyone else, right? Whereas the first one does. It's pretty selfish, and it just looks to just retaliate because of something that one or two people did. All right, and lastly here, number 3, it says, your friend pretends to be tolerant and accepting of others when someone of a different nationality is around. But behind their backs, she mocks them and makes derogatory comments about everyone who is different from her. How can you handle this situation? Well, A, talk to her and tell her why what she is doing is wrong. B, try to ignore her. If they can't hear her, what's the harm? Right? If they can't hear her because she only talks about them when they talk, when they turn away and walk away, turn around and walk away. Well, what's the harm? Well, there's still harm being done. Not only harm to you because you're hearing these things, and harm to others, but harm to the person that's telling the making the derogatory comments, right? Because what they're doing is they're solidifying that trait, that negative trait in their mind, right? Because if people aren't corrected about something, they tend to think, they start to believe that it's okay. It's an okay behavior. Well, nobody said anything to me, so it must not be anything wrong with it. And this is why we need leaders in society, to stand up for what's right. And this doesn't mean get into a shouting match with anybody. Remember, you don't want to make war to bring about peace. You want to encourage that to your students, because sometimes they'll see these things and they'll be very passionate about them. They'll be very passionate about, like the previous teacher said, when it comes to certain things and dealing with what society calls race. But we know this just the one human race, but dealing with societal issues such as disrespect or discrimination because of the color of a person's skin, or in the example of the people from Rwanda, they all have the same skin color, but they're from different tribes, different locations, right? Different nationalities, or even just different sides of the track, so to speak. Okay. So we have to remind them that even though they might be passionate about some of these views, they still must practice self-control and demonstrate respect when being assertive about these views. They don't have to be disrespectful in telling people, that what they're doing is wrong, and it shows intolerance towards other people, and what they can do to fix it. They can always show respect in those things. All right, letter C here. Do not take part in her negative comments, and consider whether you really want to be this person's friend, or both B and C. And of course, the answer to this is both B and C. Talk to her and tell her why what she's doing is wrong, and of course not take part in her negative comments, and consider whether you really want this person as a friend. Because like we have covered, the influences and the power of friends that they have over one another. We're going to get a little deeper into it as we get into the next couple chapters here. But the influence of your friends can be very, very, very powerful. So you want to be mindful about who you choose to associate yourself with, right? Because you start to take on, their attitudes, their personality, and in some cases, some of their character traits, if you're around them enough. And if your character traits or your determination to hold fast on to your positive moral character is not that strong, you might kind of let that go in order to be a part of their group, to receive friendship from them. All right, so at the bottom there we see the little cartoon. It says, man, that's not funny. I don't think, man, that's funny, the group of girls say. And then off to the side, the other girl, you see she looks a little bit not too joyous there. I don't think that's funny. Comments like that are hurtful. And it could just be something just that simple, right? Comments like that are hurtful. You probably wouldn't like that if somebody said that about you. You shouldn't say those things about others, right? Just little things. They don't have to go into a long 30-minute dissertation about acceptance and intolerance. Just a little seed like that planted can put a spark in a person's mind to possibly get them on the road to considering their thoughts, feelings, and actions. All right, let's look at page, hold on, let me make sure here. Well, we're going to look at page 35, but let's look back to Lesson Plan 2, page E. Lesson Plan 2, page E. So you can put your finger there in 34, 35, and go back to Lesson Plan 2, page E. And then we're going to look at Procedure 8. And of course, this is where we're going to start off for the next class. It says, have students turn to page 35 and read the section entitled, It's All About Getting Along. And instruct students to complete the assignment found at the end of the page. Allow students time to share some of their ideas with the class. Then have students read the section in their handbooks entitled, It's all about forgiveness, and we're going to talk about this forgiveness and some very. I'm trying to think if it's. Well, it's not in this one here. We might get to a little bit later, but forgiveness is a very powerful tool in dealing with intolerance and being able to move forward past a very hurtful experience. Okay, and people have said many times, I wasn't able to actually move forward until I did forgive. Forgive the person who wronged me, and it was like a big weight that lifted off my shoulder. It is the same thing for people who had done wrong and asked or sought forgiveness from the person that they did wrong. Right? They didn't even realize that they were carrying around a load with them until something was brought to their attention, and they sought forgiveness from that person that they had treated disrespectfully or demonstrated intolerance towards or whatever. And they said the same thing. Once I did that, and that person forgave me, it was like a big weight that was lifted off my shoulder. So we can't underestimate the power of forgiveness in society. I think if more of it took place, we would have less retaliation, when things are done towards other people. So it says, read that section entitled, It's All About Forgiveness, found on page 37, and then discuss the questions at the bottom of the page, allowing students to write in their answers. Encourage students to always practice forgiveness of others who have not yet learned this program. Remind them that their example will be the best way to begin teaching acceptance to others. And again, we reiterate that phrase, example, the best example, because that's what we're trying to, in raising teachers or teaching teachers, training teachers, and that's what you're training to be in our teachers. But as you teach your students, you in effect are doing the same thing towards them, leaders, teachers, right? And that's what they're going to do. They're going to take what they have been taught, and maybe not every single thing, but they'll remember certain portions of this, and they'll carry it with them throughout the rest of their life, because it was something that was maybe extremely valuable, dear to them, and they'll remember that, and they'll kind of be an advocate for that one or two or maybe 4 or 5 points that they heard from the peaceful solution, and they'll use those things to try to direct their life in an orderly manner and be a proper example to others. But the example, our behavior and our attitude, is what shows the morality in our character, right? As we talked about in the previous chapter, our character unit, the 3 basic categories of morality is shown through our behavior and attitude. And of course, as we continue to teach the students these lessons, and their hearts and their minds start to change, as a teacher, you will begin to see their behavior and attitude start to change. And as a result, the entire environment around you will change. Hopefully next time we have class, I want to give you an example of a teacher who kind of did the same thing. And it was interesting because, you think a teacher who was trying to make a difference in the life of students, a positive difference in the life of students who were in kind of impoverished, low income. They were kind of looked at as the low end on the stick, these students. And there have been teachers throughout history that they didn't see those students as less valuable than the other students or students in other schools. And they actually had true care for the students and wanted to do their very utmost best to help the students, see the value in themselves, and then lead them down the path where they can start educating themselves to become better people, to become more productive members of society. And it's odd because within those teachers' own peer group, the other teachers and the administrators and so forth, they got a lot of pushback. They got a lot of pushback. You're never going to be able to change these students. They're incorrigible or whatever. They're always going to be that way. They all come from this part of the neighborhood. And it's kind of shocking because you think when a person gets into the field of education, part of that purpose or the goal is to improve the lives of others. Well, that's not always the case, because if they have not been trained in positive moral character, then they're not going to carry that in that role of educator. And what you're training here is going to give you that very tool, those very tools that you need to be a positive leader, a teacher, and role model to others. So we're going to stop there and pick up on page 35 next class. Oh, nope, not 35. Why did I say 35? Yeah. We'll pick up. Well, you know we'll pick up next class. Oh, I'm in the wrong book. I'm in the character book. All right. Next class will be 8-1, August 1, 8-1 at 5:30 p.m. Yes, it is page 35. I'm sorry, I was looking at my character book. Next class will be 8-1, 5:30 p.m. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you here Sunday. Thank you very much.